Hi, this is Jennifer Joy from Spark Your Being, Master Fearless Living Coach and Life Purpose Palm Reader. And this is the second video in my series that is all about identifying your fingerprints and really comes from this program that I've developed called Your Patterns Unlocked. So if you've watched the previous video, you'll know that your fingerprints form in utero between the 14th and 16th week of pregnancy, and they never change. And really, they signify your soul's mission here on earth, or the soul psychology. And I encourage you to go back and listen to that video if you haven't yet and find out exactly what we mean by soul psychology. But for a quick synopsis, your soul psychology basically includes your life purpose, which is what your soul came to be during this lifetime, your life lesson, which is really how you do your life purpose. It's often your biggest opportunity for growth, and your life school, which is the theme of your life that contains the overarching patterns in your life that happen again and again and again. And those patterns can be patterns that move you forward, like maybe you're really good at listening to your heart or trusting yourself or using your voice. And then there are also those patterns that might be holding you back from truly living who you are, like procrastination, perfectionism, or any other form of self-sabotage. So that's a quick overview of soul psychology. So let's go ahead and look at identifying your fingerprints, because that's how we find out what our life purpose, life lesson, and life school are. So there are 4 main types of fingerprints. Now, these are just the main types. And if you imagine you can have prints on your fingers, you can also have prints on your palms. So even with these 4 main types of fingerprints, there are infinite possibilities, right? No one has ever had the exact same fingerprints as you, ever. No one living, no one who has lived before. There are infinite possibilities. So let's take a look at the first type of fingerprint. And the first type of fingerprint is an arch. And the arch is considered the least complex of the fingerprints. And you can see here, they just look like a little arch or a little ant hill or something, just this little curved hill. And you can see if you go down to the center of that hill, there's not much there but a smaller hill. It's just a hill on top of a hill on top of a hill on top of a hill. So that is an arch fingerprint. Now, tented arches also have that arch-like effect, right? They look like a hill, but if you go down into the middle of that hill, you can see there's a little tent pole there, a little vertical line, or to me it almost looks like a little Eiffel Tower, a little mini Eiffel Tower. So that's a tented arch. The next type of fingerprint that's a little more complex than the tented arch is the loop. And let me just say, when I mean complex, we hypothesize in scientific hand analysis that maybe it took a little more energy to create a more complex fingerprint when you were in development, right? A little more energy, a little more juice that created this more intricate wave pattern in your hands. So a loop, these are actually the most common fingerprint today, the most common one. And you can see they look like a little, almost a little lasso or a rounded wave. So what differs majorly from the arches is the arches come in and go out on, it's like they come in on one side of the fingerprint and then the line goes out on the other side. With a loop, you can see that it all comes in from one side of the fingerprint to create that loop. And then if you look way off to the side, you can often see sort of a tented arch way off to the side, sort of propping that loop up. Now, we don't really count the tented arch. The main focus of this fingerprint is that loop formation that comes in and loops around and goes back out the same way it came in. And then the most complex of the fingerprints is the whorl. And yes, that's whorl with an O. It's not a typo. It's a whorl. And they look like a bullseye almost. There's these concentric circles. And if you look on the bottom, there are almost 2 little tent poles holding that circle up. Okay, so it's almost a bullseye. Now, these are the 4 main types of fingerprints, and like I said, there are infinite possibilities, not only because we have 10 different fingers and a whole different bunch of placements where these prints can occur on our palm too, but there can be mashups. That's right. There can be mashups where it's a little bit of a whirl and a little bit of a loop, or a little bit of a tented arch and a little bit of a loop. So these are some samples of the mashups, some of the more common ones. There's the arch loop, which you can see is got the little tent pole in the middle and a tiny one little loop off to the right. That's a tented arch, or I'm sorry, an arch loop. The tented arch loop is much more significant. It's this picture in the middle where there's this huge loop, and then that tent pole that's holding it up, it's near the center of your fingerprint. So it's not way off to the side holding it up, it's more near the center, taking a prominent position in the fingerprint along with that loop. And that's a tented arch loop. And then we have the peacock, which is a little whirl. It's a whirl and loop combination. It's got that little whirl in the middle, and then it kind of loops around, and it creates that peacock feather look. And like I said, these are just some of the very common mashups. There can be any type of mashup. There's even such a crazy mashup of everything that it's actually called a gamut fingerprint. So this is where it really helps to be a hand analyst, a scientific hand analyst, because trying to identify some of these mashups can be tricky. It can be very tricky. Now, what's interesting is that as you look at your fingerprints, you may notice that you have the same pattern on all of your fingers. That happens. And maybe you've got some patterns in your palm that are the same as your fingers, or maybe you have no patterns in your palm at all. Or you can have completely different fingerprints. They're just totally different, and you've got a whole bunch of them on your palm too. It can be totally different. So here's just an example of just a random, here's how some fingerprints could look. There's no rhyme nor reason to them, right? And I know for me, I actually, if I look at my fingerprints and my palm prints, I have 1 arch, I have 2 tented arch loops, and I have 11 loops. 11 loops. So the most dominant theme in my hand is that loop energy, and the least dominant, well, I don't have any whorls. So those patterns don't affect my life much at all. I do have 1 arch. That's my least complex fingerprint, with my loops being my most complex. So what does this mean? What does it mean after you identify your fingerprints? What do you do with that information? Well, I can't teach you all of hand and analysis. Oh, that word always trips me up. I've been doing it for years and I still get tripped up. I can't teach you all of hand analysis. Yet, I am going to show you how if you can identify your fingerprints, how you can find out what your life school is. And again, that life school is the theme of your life. It contains all of those patterns, the good ones and the bad ones. So for me, it's one of the most important pieces of information that you can have from your hand. So I can't wait to share that with you at the next video. I will see you there.